Hope you all are energized because the next topic we have is going to be an interview. It's going to be in person and it's going to take place here. And it's going to be held with Habib, Abdur-Rahman, ESG lead at Investcorp, on the subject of an investor's perspective on the ESG. Habib will be answering questions from AlHajeri, Youth Delegate, UAE's permanent mission to the UN, and a future sustainability leader, like an alumni, right? Right. So, please, without further ado.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be back. If I may start by saying congratulations to each and every one of you for making it this far, especially after a very tough and very uncertain year. So I think everyone here deserves a round of applause, if I may. I want to thank the Y4S platform for having me here, especially after a very long and tough 2 years. The past 2 years, indeed, with the pandemic, and as our country celebrates its golden jubilee and sets the stones for the next 50 years, it gives us a time to reflect and rethink the things that matters the most, one of which is definitely youth. Today, there are over 1.1 billion young persons around the globe, consisting of 18% of the world's population alone. So the question here really is, how can we utilize the 1.1 billion opportunities, as I like to call them, we have today? Additionally, young people are the most vulnerable group to climate change impact, as they are the one expected to live with it. Therefore, we really ask ourselves, what is, in a world where climate change impacts are more evident than ever, what did we do to minimize its costs and ensure a better future for the next generations to come? How can we turn those 1.1 billion opportunities into economically beneficial and sustainable investment prospects? We have with us Mr. Habib Abdur-Rahman, who will attempt to answer some of these questions and share with us his perspective on our topic today. To those who are not familiar with our guest today, Mr. Habib Abdur-Rahman is based in Abu Dhabi and leads Investcorp's environmental, social, and governance efforts globally, overseeing the firm's approach to incorporating responsible investment and sustainable business practices. He also leads Investcorp's corporate development function, where he focuses on key firm-wide strategic and operational initiatives. Investcorp is a leading global alternative investment manager for individuals, families, and institutional investors, and has a presence in 12 countries, including India, China, and Singapore. Mr. Abdur-Rahman is an associate of the Royal College of Science and received a Bachelor's of Science in Mathematics from Imperial College London and a Master's degree in Oriental Studies from the University of Oxford. Mr. Abdur-Rahman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So to start off our session, I would like to ask you, in the recent years, there has been a considerable development globally on the topic of ESG and sustainability. As an investor with a global reach, I know you devoted a significant amount of time thinking about these topics. Can you give us some insight into what sustainability means for an investor?
Absolutely. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And I congratulate you as well on being appointed the youth delegate, the UAE's youth delegate to the United Nations. It's a critical role. And I know that the youth of the UAE are looking to you to make their voices heard, and I know you'll do your utmost to do that. It's also a pleasure, of course, to be here with you and your audience to talk about issues of critical importance to our collective sustainable development. And these platforms bringing business, academia, and government together is extremely important. I think to answer the question around how we think about sustainable investment and responsible investment, I think it's probably useful to define what we mean by sustainability in the first instance, or ESG. And ESG, of course, stands for environmental, social, and governance. I think for an investor, sustainability can be looked at in two ways. In the first instance, you think about how a business's activities, its products, and its services impact key elements of sustainable development in the economy, on the environment and in society. But I think at the same time, you need to think about it, how it works the other way as well. How are changes in the environment, how are changes in society impacting the way businesses, or the ability of businesses, to continue to produce products and services that people want? And it's important to think about it in both of those ways. And at Investcorp, we've been thinking about it quite in some detail over the past couple of years, and we've just released our 2021 ESG report that outlines it in a lot of detail. But we've really thought about this as an opportunity to really build an ecosystem around responsibility. And the eco in ecosystem really stands for being a responsible employer, being a responsible citizen, and being a responsible operator. So when I think about what does it mean to be a responsible employer? It's about diversity and inclusion. Of course, it's about diversity and inclusion, but it's also about ensuring equitable pay and benefits for your employees. It's about providing the training that your employees may need to develop the future skills they may need for the future. And being a responsible citizen is, of course, about climate change and emissions, but it's about the contribution we make, in the communities in which we live, in which we work, and in which we invest. But in addition to that, being a responsible operator is about putting in place good governance. It's about good business ethics. And good governance really is around ensuring that we've got the right mechanisms in place within a company such that issues of sustainability are adequately and appropriately addressed at the right levels of the organization. So that's the way we think about it. It's a holistic method, and any investment we do, we apply those three lenses to those investments.
Indeed, I would agree, especially that in my workplace, the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, we definitely share similar values and similar methods to how we approach businesses, and more specifically, sustainable businesses. So since you spoke about responsibility and the importance of being both a responsible employer and a responsible citizen, can you give us an example of where you've applied your approach to sustainability in practice?
Very good question. And I think, if you want to look at or determine how you're performing on sustainable development, it's important to look at the results. And, one investment that we're particularly proud of is a company called Fresh to Home. And it's essentially, one of India's largest, and perhaps even one of the world's largest, online fish and meat e-grocery stores. It was founded in India, but it has a growing presence in the UAE, and it has an increasingly growing presence across the GCC. And what the company essentially realized was that the time it took from actually collecting the fish from the fisheries and the meat from the farmers to it arriving on your plate under your fork was a long amount, several days, or 4 or 5 days. And they realized that the reason that was taking so long was because there were so many middlemen in the process. And so they invested heavily to build a cold chain infrastructure in India. And essentially what that means is it's a supply chain that's kept at a low temperature, where they collect the fish directly from the farmers, or the meat directly from the fishermen and the meat from the farmers, and send it to their processing facilities, and then it goes on to people's homes. It reduced a 4 or 5 day supply chain to less than 36 hours, which essentially means that people can get fresher food, right? Which was an extremely important step that they've taken. But another important thing I think to realize is that that process of 5 days, right? There's a lot of waste that occurs in that process. The food is changing many hands as it goes along. And by focusing on building this cold chain infrastructure and doing it all themselves, they've managed to reduce waste, to a tune of 10 times less than the global average, right? Today, around 15% of food that is produced goes to waste, right? And if we're to look at the food security of the region, it's important to get that down. So Fresh to Home has done that, and it's down to about 1.5% today. And they've also employed 17,000 people along the way, right? Providing good jobs, providing better livelihoods for fishermen and farmers. I think it's companies like these where they're delivering real-world outcomes that is critical to not only good food security but good employment, good job prospects. So that's one example.
If I may say, I think I'm a proud Emirati to say how very visionary and very responsible our government is to be thinking ahead of how to invest in those very innovative and very also sustainable projects that looks to not only the next 10 years, but we also think about the next 50 years as well. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Lastly, maybe we can, since the environmental issues such as climate change has captured the spotlight for companies and government all around the world, but equally there is a strong sensitivity towards these issues, as I said previously, among young people in society. How do you see the role of young people in driving sustainable development?
Again, a very important question. And I think, of course, young people have a critical role to play in the decision-making process that impacts all of our futures. And I think, I think in 10 to 15 years' time, it's going to be the young people in this room, right, that are going to be the key drivers of change. You will be the key decision makers going forward on issues of climate, on issues of job prospects for young people, on issues of how you develop your own communities. And so, it's, the role is definitely one that's there for the taking, and you should take it. But if I was to summarize and say, okay, what are the key 3 things you guys can take away today and you can start doing? I'd say, firstly, question the status quo, right? Question the current business models that you see in the world today. Question the current economic models that you see in the world today. Question the employment models you see in the world today. It's important for you to do that. I think, secondly, build the new business models. Right, build the new economic ways of thinking. Build the new employment models that you want to see, that's fit for sustainable development of the economy here in the UAE and globally. And if you look at technological advancements that have been made over the past few years, right, it's completely changed how young people interact with society, how young people interact with their peers, with the public sector, with the private sector. And so it's important to continue to build those ways of thinking. And I think, finally, hold your institutions to account, right? So, I think, whether it's your professor at college, or it's your employer, or it's your peers, or your local government representative, ask the tough questions, right? And I'll give you a real life example of this. So at Investcorp, we, of course, we hire people for jobs that we have. And increasingly what we've been seeing is that people have been asking us, what are you doing on the environment? What's your position on climate change? How are you evolving diversity inclusion practices? And because these questions have been asked, now these questions are being discussed at the highest levels of our organization. It's not that we weren't discussing them anyway, but it's accelerated the discussion because you are asking these questions. And now new policies are being put in place. So it's very clear to me that by making your voice heard, and I think these platforms like these, as I say, bringing together business, academia and government, really helps to move that along.
I couldn't personally agree more. I think the more you question some of these actions, the more you cultivate your creativity and your innovations in order to come up with creative solutions that would tackle the previous issues and come up with, per se, better solutions for the future. If I may conclude by asking you, what is your advice to all the youth who are with us today or listening to us, who are interested in sustainable investments? What's your personal advice to them to get them going or further involve them and encourage them to join this field?
I think remain curious, right? Always remain curious and question. That's the first thing. Secondly, persevere, right? Because perseverance pays off, and I've seen it myself. And I'm a millennial. May not look like it, but I'm 35 years old. I've persevered, and I have a role to play within our organisation where I'm trying to drive home, the importance of environmental, social, and governance. And I think finally, just put yourself in other people's shoes. Be empathetic to what other people are actually asking you and talking about. And so, curiosity, perseverance, and empathy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your advice. I enjoyed the session, and I hope every one of you enjoyed the session and would carry everything Mr. Abdur-Rahman said today with you, and to hopefully see your future projects not only present and well established here in the Emirates, but also globally. Inshallah. Thank you again so much. This takes us to the end of our session, and Please stay safe, and we'll see you in the future.